The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Guardsman Michael Thompson adjusted his iconic red tunic one final time. At 26 years old, he had served as a Queen's Guard for 3 years. But today felt different. There was an electric tension in the air that he couldn't quite place his finger on. Michael had grown up in a small town in Yorkshire, where his grandfather had filled his childhood with stories of military honor and duty to the crown. Those tales had shaped young Michael's dreams, leading him through rigorous training with the Coldstream Guards until he earned the privilege of standing watch at the most famous palace in the world. The ceremonial duties were demanding in ways most people never understood. Standing perfectly still for hours, maintaining composure regardless of weather conditions, and ignoring the countless tourists who tried everything imaginable to get a reaction. Michael had seen it all, people making faces, telling jokes, even attempting to dance right in front of him. His training had prepared him for these distractions, teaching him to remain as motionless as the stone lions that flanked the palace gates. Today's ceremony was particularly important. Foreign dignitaries were visiting, and the media attention was heightened. Michael could see the news crews setting up their equipment, their cameras already focusing on the guards as they prepared for the changing of the guard ceremony. This ancient tradition, dating back centuries, drew thousands of spectators daily, but diplomatic visits always brought additional scrutiny. As Michael took his position, he noticed the crowd was larger than usual. Tourists clustered behind the black iron railings, phones, and cameras ready to capture every moment of the precise military pageantry they were about to witness. Children pressed their faces against the bars, wide-eyed with wonder at the tall soldiers in their magnificent uniforms. Among the crowd, Sarah Jenkins stood with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had traveled from Manchester specifically to see the ceremony, but her motivations were far from those of a typical tourist. Sarah belonged to a radical activist group that opposed the monarchy, viewing the royal family as an outdated symbol of inequality and privilege. Her group had planned this moment for weeks. They believed that disrupting the ceremony would send a powerful message about their cause and generate the media attention they desperately sought. Sarah had volunteered for what they considered a noble sacrifice. She would be arrested, but their message would be heard around the world. The pepper spray canister felt heavy in her jacket pocket as she pushed closer to the front of the crowd. Her heart raced as she rehearsed the speech she planned to shout before security could stop her. She had practiced the words dozens of times, each phrase carefully crafted to maximize impact in the few seconds she would have before being detained. Michael began the ceremonial march with his fellow guards, their synchronized steps echoing off the palace walls. Each movement was precise, each turn executed with military perfection. The crowd fell silent, mesmerized by the display of discipline and tradition unfolding before them. The bearskin hat on Michael's head weighed nearly 2 pounds, but years of training had strengthened his neck muscles to bear the load without strain. His rifle, though ceremonial, was held with the same respect and precision as if he were in active combat. Every element of his uniform, from the polished buttons to the white belt, represented centuries of military heritage. As the guards moved through their formation, Michael's peripheral vision caught sight of movement in the crowd. Years of training had heightened his awareness, allowing him to monitor his surroundings while maintaining perfect military bearing. Something about the woman in the dark jacket seemed different from the other spectators. Sarah's palms grew sweaty as the moment approached. She had positioned herself at the perfect angle where she could step forward and confront the guard directly. Her activist friends had assured her that the shock value of her actions would be worth any consequences. They had studied videos of previous ceremonies, identifying the exact moment when the guards would be most vulnerable to disruption. The ceremony continued with clockwork precision. Michael and his fellow guards executed each movement flawlessly, their years of training evident in every step. The crowd watched in respectful silence, many visitors experiencing this quintessentially British tradition for the first time. Media photographers adjusted their lenses, knowing that any unusual occurrence during the ceremony would be front-page news around the world. The presence of international dignitaries meant that news outlets from dozens of countries were covering the event, their reporters ready to broadcast any developments instantly to global audiences. Michael felt the familiar surge of pride that came with representing his country on such a grand stage. Despite the physical demands and constant public scrutiny, he genuinely loved his role as a Queen's Guard. There was something profoundly meaningful about being part of a tradition that connected him to generations of soldiers who had stood in the same positions, wearing the same uniform, upholding the same values. The morning breeze carried the sounds of London traffic from beyond the palace grounds, but within the courtyard, time seemed suspended. The ceremony created a bubble of history and tradition that transported spectators back to an earlier era, when such displays of military precision were matters of life and death rather than tourist attractions. Sarah checked her watch and took a deep breath. In just a few minutes, she would make her move. Her group had chosen this particular ceremony because they knew the international media coverage would amplify their message far beyond what any protest march or petition could achieve. She felt the weight of their cause on her shoulders as she prepared to sacrifice her freedom for what she believed was a greater good. The guards continued their march, oblivious to the drama about to unfold. Michael's mind was focused entirely on his duties, his body moving with the automatic precision that came from countless hours of drill practice. He had no way of knowing that in a few short minutes, his training would be tested in ways he had never imagined. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything Michael had learned about duty, composure, and the true meaning of being unfazed under pressure. The ceremony reached its crescendo as the guards formed their final formation near the palace gates. Michael stood at attention, his rifle held perfectly vertical, his eyes fixed straight ahead as protocol demanded. The crowd pressed closer to the railings, eager to capture photos of the magnificent spectacle before them. Sarah's moment had arrived. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain others could hear it. She pulled the pepper spray from her jacket pocket, her fingers trembling slightly as she prepared to step forward. The activist group had assured her that this dramatic gesture would force people to pay attention to their message about social inequality and the outdated nature of the monarchy. The media cameras continued rolling, their operators unaware that they were about to capture something far more dramatic than a routine ceremony. International news crews adjusted their positions, seeking the perfect angle to showcase British pageantry to their global audiences. Michael noticed the subtle shift in the crowd's energy before he saw the actual movement. His training had taught him to be aware of everything happening around him while maintaining his ceremonial pose. Years of standing guard had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was about to go wrong. Without warning, Sarah broke through the crowd's restraint and rushed toward the palace railings. Security guards immediately began moving in her direction, but she was already at the barrier, her arm extended toward Michael with the pepper spray canister clearly visible in her hand. "Down with the monarchy!" she shouted, her voice cracking with nervous energy. "This ceremony represents everything wrong with our society. While people struggle to pay their bills, we waste money on this outdated theater." The crowd gasped as Sarah pressed the nozzle of the pepper spray canister. A stream of chemical irritant shot directly toward Michael's face, hitting him square in the eyes and surrounding his bearskin hat with a cloud of the burning substance. The reaction from the spectators was immediate and dramatic. Children began crying, their parents pulling them back from the railings in shock and fear. Tourists fumbled with their phones, torn between documenting the unprecedented scene and getting to safety. The carefully orchestrated atmosphere of the ceremony shattered in an instant. Michael felt the pepper spray hit his face like liquid fire. His eyes immediately began burning with an intensity he had never experienced, even during his military training with chemical agents. Tears streamed down his cheeks as his body's natural defense mechanisms kicked in, trying to flush the irritant from his system. But something remarkable happened in that moment of crisis. Instead of breaking formation, crying out, or even raising his hands to his burning eyes, Michael remained perfectly still. His training took over completely, overriding every instinct his body was screaming at him to follow. The burning sensation spread across his face, making breathing difficult and vision nearly impossible. His eyes felt like they were filled with molten metal, and his skin burned as if he had been struck by lightning. Yet Michael's rifle remained in perfect position, his posture unchanged, his expression stoic despite the obvious physical distress. Security personnel swarmed toward Sarah, but she continued shouting her prepared speech even as they closed in on her. The royal family lives in luxury while families choose between heating their homes and feeding their children. This ceremony is a symbol of everything that needs to change. The other guards in Michael's unit maintained their positions as well, though they were clearly aware of what was happening to their colleague. Their training emphasized that the ceremony must continue regardless of disruptions, and they followed protocol even as they watched their fellow guardsmen endure what appeared to be a severe assault. Media photographers and camera operators went into overdrive, recognizing that they were witnessing an extraordinary moment. The contrast between Sarah's emotional outburst and Michael's unwavering composure created a powerful visual story that would dominate headlines within hours. Michael's internal struggle was invisible to the watching crowd. Every fiber of his being wanted to wipe his eyes, to step back, to react in some way to the chemical attack. The pain was unlike anything he had experienced, worse than any training exercise or actual combat situation he had encountered during his military service. Yet he remained motionless, a living statue in the face of adversity. His grandfather's stories about military honor echoed in his mind, reminding him that a true soldier's character is revealed not in moments of comfort, but in times of trial. This was his test, and he was determined not to fail. Sarah was quickly subdued by security officers, but not before she had delivered her entire prepared statement. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at Michael with a mixture of satisfaction and surprise. She had expected her attack to break the guard's composure, to create a moment of human vulnerability that would underscore her political message. Instead, she had witnessed something that would haunt her for years to come, the power of absolute discipline and dedication to duty. Michael's refusal to react had transformed her act of protest into something entirely different, creating a symbol of unwavering commitment that contradicted everything she had hoped to achieve. The crowd began to realize what they had witnessed was extraordinary. Murmurs of amazement rippled through the spectators as they processed the guard's incredible display of self-control. Many visitors had come expecting to see a quaint British tradition, but they had instead witnessed something profound about human character and professional dedication. Michael's fellow guards completed the ceremony with military precision, but the focus had shifted entirely to the young man who continued to stand at perfect attention despite the obvious distress written across his face. His tears from the pepper spray were clearly visible, but his posture remained as rigid as if nothing had happened. The burning sensation in Michael's eyes intensified, and he could taste the chemical irritant on his lips. His vision was severely compromised, reduced to blurry shapes and bright lights. Yet he held his position, drawing on reserves of mental strength he didn't know he possessed. The incident lasted only minutes, but those minutes felt like hours to Michael. Each second stretched endlessly as he fought against every natural instinct to protect himself. His training had prepared him for many scenarios, but standing perfectly still while under chemical attack required a level of discipline that went beyond standard military instruction. As Sarah disappeared into the custody of security forces, the ceremony officially concluded. But the real story was just beginning, as news of the Unfazed Royal Guard began spreading across social media and news networks around the world. The ceremony concluded with military precision, but the atmosphere had changed completely. As the guards marched back to their positions, Michael finally allowed himself a slight exhale of relief. The formal duties were complete, but the pepper spray continued to burn his eyes with relentless intensity. Only when the official ceremony ended and the guards were dismissed did Michael permit himself to acknowledge the attack. Medical personnel rushed to his aid, but even then, he moved with deliberate, controlled steps rather than the panicked rush his body desperately wanted. His professionalism remained intact even in the face of genuine medical need. Dr. Emma Walsh, the palace's on-duty medical officer, had witnessed the entire incident from her position near the medical station. She had been prepared to intervene immediately if Michael showed any signs of serious distress, but his remarkable composure had allowed the ceremony to conclude naturally. "Let's get you cleaned up, Guardsman Thompson," Dr. Walsh said gently, as she guided him to the medical facility. "What you just did was extraordinary, but we need to make sure you're properly treated." The medical bay was a small, efficiently organized space tucked away from public view. Dr. Walsh had treated everything from heat exhaustion to tourist-related injuries during her time at the palace, but she had never dealt with a pepper spray attack during an official ceremony. Michael sat quietly as Dr. Walsh began flushing his eyes with saline solution. The relief was immediate but gradual, like slowly emerging from a nightmare. His vision began to clear, though his eyes remained red and swollen from the chemical irritant. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Walsh asked as she continued the treatment. "Any difficulty breathing? Skin irritation beyond your face?" "I'm fine, doctor," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the ordeal. "My eyes are clearing up already. I've had worse during training exercises." Dr. Walsh smiled at his understatement. She had seen grown men reduced to tears by much less severe pepper spray exposure. Michael's calm demeanor was as impressive as his performance during the ceremony itself. Meanwhile, outside the medical bay, news of the incident was spreading with lightning speed. Social media platforms exploded with videos and photos of the attack, but more significantly, they were filled with amazement at Michael's response. The hashtag #Unfazed Guard began trending within an hour of the incident. Commander James Harrison, the officer in charge of the Queen's Guard detail, arrived at the medical facility as Dr. Walsh was completing her examination. He had served in the military for over 20 years and had seen exceptional displays of discipline, but Michael's performance had impressed even his seasoned perspective. "Thompson," Commander Harrison said as he entered the medical bay, "I wanted to check on your condition personally. The entire chain of command is talking about what happened out there." Michael stood at attention despite Dr. Walsh's attempts to keep him seated for further observation. "Sir, I'm fully fit for duty. The incident didn't interfere with the completion of the ceremony." Commander Harrison studied the young guardsman carefully. Michael's eyes were still clearly irritated, and his face showed obvious signs of chemical exposure, yet his bearing remained impeccable. It was exactly the kind of dedication that made the Queen's Guard legendary around the world. "At ease, Thompson," the commander said. "What you demonstrated today goes beyond standard training. Can you walk me through what you were thinking during the attack?" Michael relaxed slightly, but maintained his respectful posture. "Sir, when the woman approached with the spray, my first thought was to maintain the integrity of the ceremony. The training took over completely. I knew that reacting would disrupt not just my own position, but potentially the entire formation." "And the pain?" Commander Harrison asked. "Pepper spray is designed to incapacitate. How did you manage to ignore such intense physical discomfort?" "I focused on my grandfather's words about what it means to be a soldier," Michael replied honestly. "He always said that anyone can stand tall when things are easy, but true character shows when everything goes wrong. I kept thinking that this was my moment to prove I belonged in this uniform." Dr. Walsh nodded approvingly as she listened to Michael's explanation. His mental approach to the crisis showed the same discipline as his physical response. She had seen many people break under far less pressure, yet this young man had found strength in family wisdom and professional pride. Commander Harrison was quiet for a moment, processing Michael's words. In his years of service, he had learned to recognize the difference between soldiers who merely followed orders and those who truly understood the deeper meaning of their duty. Michael clearly belonged to the latter category. "The media is already calling you a hero," Commander Harrison said. "News outlets around the world are covering the story. How do you feel about that kind of attention?" Michael looked genuinely surprised by this information. During the attack and treatment, he had been focused entirely on the immediate situation. The idea that his response would generate international interest hadn't occurred to him. "Sir, I was just doing my job," Michael said simply. "Every guardsman is trained to maintain composure regardless of circumstances. I don't think what I did was particularly heroic." This humble response impressed Commander Harrison even more than the original incident. Many soldiers would have been eager to capitalize on such attention, but Michael seemed genuinely puzzled by the praise he was receiving. Dr. Walsh completed her final examination and declared Michael fit for duty, though she recommended he take the rest of the day to recover fully. The chemical irritant was completely flushed from his system, and while his eyes remained slightly red, there would be no lasting effects from the attack. As word of the incident spread through the palace, other guards began stopping by to check on their colleague. Michael was well respected among his peers, but his performance during the pepper spray attack had elevated him to legendary status within the unit. Guardsman David Roberts, who had been standing just 10 feet away during the incident, was among the first to visit. "Mate, I don't know how you did it," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "I could see you were in agony, but you never moved a muscle. It was like watching a statue come to life while somehow remaining a statue." Other guards shared similar sentiments, each expressing their admiration for Michael's extraordinary display of discipline. They understood better than anyone how difficult it would have been to maintain composure under such circumstances. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Colonel Margaret Davies, the highest-ranking female officer in the Guards Division, made a special trip to personally commend Michael's performance. "Guardsman Thompson," she said as she entered the medical bay, "what you accomplished today will be remembered as one of the finest examples of military bearing in the history of the Queen's Guard. You've brought honor not just to yourself, but to every person who has ever worn this uniform." Michael felt a surge of pride that was deeper and more meaningful than any he had experienced during his military career. The recognition from his superiors was gratifying, but knowing that he had lived up to the standards set by generations of guards before him was profoundly moving. Within hours of the incident, Michael's story had reached every corner of the globe. News networks from New York to Tokyo led their broadcasts with footage of the unfazed Royal Guard, and social media platforms buzzed with discussions about his extraordinary display of discipline. The BBC was among the first major outlets to provide comprehensive coverage of the event. Their royal correspondent, Patricia Blackwood, had covered the monarchy for over 15 years, but she had never witnessed anything quite like Michael's response to the pepper spray attack. "This young guardsman has demonstrated something truly remarkable," Blackwood reported from outside Buckingham Palace. "In an age where we're accustomed to seeing people react emotionally to the slightest provocation, Guardsman Thompson's composure under genuine physical assault reminds us of what true professionalism looks like." American news networks picked up the story with equal enthusiasm. CNN's international correspondent described the incident as a masterclass in self-control, while Fox News praised Michael's dedication to duty. The universal nature of the praise was unusual in an era of divided opinions, but Michael's actions seemed to transcend political boundaries. Social media reaction was overwhelmingly positive, though it revealed interesting cultural differences. American users frequently compared Michael to their own military personnel, expressing admiration for his dedication. European commenters often focused on the traditions he was upholding, while users from other Commonwealth countries saw him as representing the best of British military heritage. One particularly viral tweet came from a retired U.S. Marine. "I've served in combat zones and thought I knew what discipline looked like. This British Guard just redefined the standard. Absolute respect." The video footage, captured from multiple angles by tourists and professional cameras, showed the incident in stunning detail. Viewers could see the exact moment the pepper spray hit Michael's face, watch his eyes begin watering, and witness his absolute refusal to break character despite obvious distress. Michael remained largely unaware of his growing fame as he completed his recovery in the Palace Medical Facility. Dr. Walsh had recommended he rest for the remainder of the day, but she was amazed by how quickly he had bounced back from the chemical exposure. Most people would need several hours to fully recover from that level of pepper spray exposure, she told Commander Harrison. His physical conditioning obviously played a role, but his mental resilience is equally impressive. The commander nodded thoughtfully. He had been fielding calls from media outlets around the world, all requesting interviews with Michael. The attention was unprecedented for a single guard, and he was carefully considering how to handle the situation. "Sir," Dr. Walsh continued, "I think we should consider the psychological impact as well. Being thrust into international spotlight can be overwhelming, especially for someone who's trained to avoid drawing attention to himself." This concern proved to be well-founded when Michael's phone began buzzing with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Friends from his hometown in Yorkshire were calling to say they had seen him on television, while reporters were somehow obtaining his personal contact information. Michael's mother, Margaret Thompson, was watching the afternoon news when footage of her son appeared on screen. She had always been proud of his military service, but seeing him maintain such incredible composure under attack filled her with a mixture of pride and concern. "That's my boy," she whispered to herself, tears forming in her eyes. His grandfather would have been so proud. Margaret immediately called her son, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Unknown to her, Commander Harrison had advised all the guards involved in the ceremony to avoid media contact until the situation could be properly managed. The woman who had attacked Michael, Sarah Jenkins, was being held in custody pending charges. Her activist group was attempting to spin the incident as proof of their point about the monarchy's disconnect from real people, but their message was being completely overshadowed by admiration for Michael's response. Sarah herself was struggling with the outcome of her protest. She had expected to expose what she saw as the artificial nature of royal pageantry by forcing a human reaction from one of the guards. Instead, she had created a powerful symbol of dedication and professionalism that made her cause look petty and misguided. "I don't understand how he didn't react," she told her lawyer during their consultation. "It was pepper spray directly in his face. Any normal person would have been rolling on the ground." Her lawyer, David Mitchell, had been defending activists for over a decade, but he was having difficulty developing a defense strategy that wouldn't make his client look worse. The video evidence was clear, and public opinion was entirely against her. "Sarah," he said carefully, "the prosecution is likely to pursue serious charges. Assault on a public servant, disrupting a state ceremony, possibly even terrorism-related charges given the international diplomatic presence. Your attack on that guard has generated sympathy for the very institution you were trying to criticize." Back at the palace, Michael was finally allowed to return to his quarters to rest and process the day's events. His small room in the guards. Accommodation was simple but comfortable, decorated with photos of his family and mementos from his military service. As he sat on his bed, still wearing his dress uniform, Michael began to understand the magnitude of what had happened. His phone showed dozens of missed calls and hundreds of text messages from friends, family members, and complete strangers who had somehow obtained his number. One message stood out from his grandfather's old regiment association. "Thompson, your grandfather's mates want you to know you've done the old man proud." That was soldiering at its finest. The weight of the day finally began to settle on Michael's shoulders. He had maintained perfect composure during the attack and throughout the medical examination, but alone in his room, he allowed himself to feel the full impact of what had occurred. His hands trembled slightly as he realized how close he had come to failing in his duty. If he had broken formation, if he had cried out or stepped backward, the ceremony would have been ruined. More importantly, he would have let down every guardsman who had stood in that position before him. Michael walked to his window and looked out at the palace grounds where tourists continued to gather, many of them hoping to catch a glimpse of the guard who had become an international sensation. The irony wasn't lost on him. His greatest moment of anonymity had made him famous around the world. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Commander Harrison entered, carrying a cup of tea and wearing an expression that mixed concern with pride. "How are you holding up, Thompson?" the commander asked, setting the tea on Michael's small desk. "This kind of attention can be overwhelming." "Sir, I'm still processing everything," Michael admitted. "I never expected that doing my job would create such a reaction." Commander Harrison sat in the room's single chair, studying the young guardsman carefully. "What you did today wasn't just doing your job, son. It was exemplifying everything this uniform represents. The question now is how we handle the aftermath." The commander explained that media requests were pouring in from around the world. Television networks wanted interviews, newspapers wanted exclusive stories, and book publishers were already making inquiries about Michael's life story. "The decision is yours," Commander Harrison said. "We can arrange controlled media access, if you're comfortable with it, or we can maintain privacy and let the story fade naturally. Either way, you have the full support of the regiment." Michael considered the options carefully. Part of him wanted to retreat from the spotlight and return to the anonymous service he had always preferred. But another part recognized that his story might inspire others or bring positive attention to the military traditions he valued so deeply. "Sir, what would serve the guard best?" Michael asked, demonstrating once again that his primary concern was for something larger than himself. Commander Harrison smiled at Michael's question, recognizing once again the selfless character that had made the young guardsman's performance so remarkable. "That's exactly the right question to ask, Thompson. I think controlled engagement with the media could help people understand what the Queen's Guard really represents." Over the following days, a careful media strategy was developed. Rather than granting numerous individual interviews, it was decided that Michael would participate in a single, comprehensive television documentary about the Queen's Guard, with his story serving as the centerpiece. The documentary crew, led by veteran filmmaker Jonathan Pierce, was given unprecedented access to the Guard's training and daily routines. Pierce had made award-winning films about military subjects before, but he was particularly excited about this project because of its unique human angle. What Guardsman Thompson demonstrated goes beyond military training, Pierce explained to his production team. This is a story about character, dedication, and what happens when someone's deepest values are tested under extreme circumstances. The filming began with interviews of Michael's colleagues, who provided context for just how extraordinary his performance had been. Guardsman Roberts, who had witnessed the attack firsthand, struggled to find adequate words to describe what he had seen. "I've served alongside Michael for 2 years," Roberts told the camera. "I know he's disciplined and professional, but what he did that day was something else entirely. The pepper spray hit him square in the face, and he didn't even blink. He literally couldn't blink because his eyes were burning. But you know what I mean." Other guards shared similar sentiments, each emphasizing that while they were all trained to maintain composure, Michael's response had exceeded anything they had previously witnessed. Their testimonies helped viewers understand that this wasn't simply a matter of following standard procedures. The documentary also included interviews with military historians who placed Michael's actions in historical context. Professor Elizabeth Warren, from the Royal Military Academy, explained that such displays of discipline had been crucial to British military success throughout history. The ability to maintain formation and composure under attack has been fundamental to military effectiveness for centuries, Professor Warren explained. What makes Guardsman Thompson's response so remarkable is that he achieved this level of discipline in a ceremonial context, where the stakes were honor and tradition rather than battlefield survival. Michael's own interview was scheduled for the middle of the week, giving him time to prepare mentally for the intense scrutiny. Commander Harrison worked with him to develop talking points that would honor his service while maintaining the dignified restraint expected of a Queen's Guard. The interview took place in a quiet room within the palace, with soft lighting that minimized the lingering redness in Michael's eyes from the pepper spray attack. Pierce began with basic questions about Michael's background and motivation for joining the Guards. "I grew up hearing my grandfather's stories about military service," Michael explained, his voice steady and thoughtful. "He taught me that being a soldier isn't just about following orders. It's about representing something larger than yourself. When I put on this uniform, I'm not just Michael Thompson anymore. I'm part of a tradition that goes back centuries." Pierce pressed gently for details about the attack itself, asking Michael to walk through his thought process during those crucial moments. This was the heart of the documentary, the explanation that millions of viewers around the world were eager to hear. "When I saw the woman approaching with the spray, my first thought wasn't about the pain or danger," Michael said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "It was about the ceremony, about my fellow guards, about not letting down everyone who was depending on me to do my job properly." "But surely you felt the pain," Pierce prompted. "Pepper spray is designed to incapacitate people. How did you manage to ignore such intense physical discomfort?" Michael was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I won't lie. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. My eyes felt like they were on fire and I could barely breathe. But my grandfather always said that pain is temporary, but honor lasts forever. I kept thinking that if I broke formation, if I reacted, I would be letting down not just myself, but every guardsman who had stood in that position before me." The interviewer asked about the moments immediately after the attack, when Michael continued to stand at attention despite his obvious distress. This portion of the interview proved to be the most emotionally powerful, as Michael's voice carried the weight of genuine reflection on his experience. "Those few minutes felt like hours," Michael admitted. "Every instinct I had was screaming at me to wipe my eyes, to step back, to react in some way. But I kept thinking about what this uniform represents. Thousands of people were watching, including children who might never see a ceremony like this again. I couldn't be the guard who ruined that experience for them." Pierce was struck by Michael's focus on others rather than himself. Even when describing the most painful experience of his life, the young guardsman was primarily concerned with how his actions might have affected other people. The documentary also included footage of the attack from multiple angles, allowing viewers to see exactly what Michael had endured. The contrast between the severity of the assault and his complete lack of reaction created a powerful visual narrative that spoke more eloquently than any words could. Dr. Walsh was interviewed about the medical aspects of Michael's response, explaining to viewers just how remarkable his self-control had been from a physiological standpoint. Her scientific perspective added credibility to the story while helping audiences understand the genuine difficulty of what Michael had accomplished. "Pepper spray triggers immediate and intense physiological responses," Dr. Walsh explained. "The body's natural reflexes are designed to protect us from harmful substances. To override those reflexes requires extraordinary mental discipline and physical training." The documentary crew also traveled to Michael's hometown in Yorkshire to interview family members and childhood friends. These conversations provided insight into the character traits that had enabled his remarkable performance under pressure. Michael's mother, Margaret Thompson, spoke tearfully about her pride in her son's actions. "Michael was always a quiet, determined child," she said. "His grandfather filled his head with stories about military honor, and Michael took every word to heart. When I saw him on television, standing there with tears streaming down his face but never moving, I knew his grandfather's spirit was with him." The local pub where Michael had grown up was filled with patrons eager to share their memories of the young man who had become an international sensation. The landlord, Tom Fletcher, had known Michael since childhood and wasn't surprised by his disciplined response to the attack. Even as a lad, Michael had this inner strength, Fletcher told the camera. He never backed down from a challenge, but he never looked for trouble either. He just had this quiet confidence that you could always rely on. What he did at the palace, that's the Michael we all know. As the documentary neared completion, Pierce realized he had captured something special. The story had evolved beyond a simple news event into a profound exploration of character, duty, and the power of individual determination to inspire others. The film's final scenes showed Michael returning to his regular duties, standing guard with the same quiet professionalism he had always displayed. But now, tourists who recognized him from news coverage would whisper excitedly and point discreetly, trying to get photos of the guard who had become famous for refusing to be fazed by anything. Michael handled this new attention with the same grace he had shown during the pepper spray attack. He remained focused on his duties, never acknowledging the recognition or allowing it to dist. The documentary aired on a Thursday evening to the largest television audience BBC One had seen in months. Viewers across Britain gathered around their screens to watch the complete story of the Unfazed Royal Guard, while international audiences tuned in through various broadcasting partners around the world. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms exploded with praise for both Michael's actions and the documentary's sensitive portrayal of military service. The hashtag #WeUnfazedGuard trended globally once again, accompanied by thousands of messages of support and admiration. Military personnel from around the world shared the documentary with pride, using Michael's story as an example of what their profession represented at its best. Veterans organizations praised the film for showing the public what true military bearing looked like, while active service members found inspiration in Michael's unwavering dedication to duty. The documentary's impact extended far beyond military circles. Teachers began using Michael's story in lessons about character and perseverance. Sports coaches referenced his mental toughness when training athletes to perform under pressure. Business leaders cited his example when discussing the importance of maintaining composure during crises. Michael watched the broadcast from the guard's common room, surrounded by his fellow soldiers who had become accustomed to their colleagues' newfound fame. The experience of seeing his story told on national television was surreal, but he was pleased that the documentary had focused on the broader traditions of the Queen's Guard, rather than just his individual actions. "You've made us all look good." "Mate," Guardsman Roberts said as the credits rolled, "that film showed people what we're really about, not just the fancy uniforms and tourist photos, but the real dedication it takes to do this job properly." The other guards nodded in agreement. Michael's actions had brought positive attention to their entire unit, helping the public understand that their ceremonial duties required genuine skill and commitment, rather than just standing around looking impressive. In the days following the broadcast, Michael received hundreds of letters from viewers around the world. Children wrote to say he was their hero, while elderly veterans shared stories of their own service and praised his dedication to military values. Teachers sent class projects inspired by his example, and parents thanked him for providing a positive role model for their children. One letter particularly moved Michael. It came from a young soldier stationed in Afghanistan who wrote, "Watching your documentary reminded me why I joined the military. When things get difficult out here, I think about you standing there with pepper spray burning your eyes, never moving, never complaining. It helps me remember that being a soldier is about something bigger than myself." The letter reinforced Michael's growing understanding that his actions had transcended the specific incident at Buckingham Palace. He had become a symbol of values that resonated with people far beyond military circles: dedication, selflessness, and the ability to maintain one's principles under pressure. Sarah Jenkins, meanwhile, had pleaded guilty to the charges against her and received a suspended sentence, along with community service requirements. The judge's comments during sentencing reflected the public mood about the incident. "Ms. Jenkins, while I understand that you felt strongly about your political beliefs, your actions that day achieved the opposite of what you intended," the judge said. "Instead of highlighting problems with our institutions, you created a powerful demonstration of what makes them worthy of respect. I hope you will use your community service time to reflect on more constructive ways to express your political views." Sarah had indeed been reflecting on the incident and its aftermath. The overwhelming public support for Michael had forced her to reconsider her assumptions about the military and the monarchy. She began to realize that her attack had revealed something admirable rather than exposing something corrupt. During her community service at a veterans support center, Sarah met former soldiers who helped her understand the deeper meaning of military service. Their stories of sacrifice and dedication gradually changed her perspective on the institutions she had once opposed. "I thought I was exposing the artificial nature of the ceremony," she confided to one of the counselors at the center. "But what I actually did was prove how real and meaningful it is. That guard didn't break character because there was no character to break. That's who he really is." Back at Buckingham Palace, life had settled into a new normal for Michael. The intense media attention had faded to a manageable level, though he still received occasional interview requests and speaking invitations. Commander Harrison helped him navigate these opportunities, ensuring that any public appearances served the interests of the regiment rather than promoting personal fame. Michael accepted a few carefully selected speaking engagements, primarily at military academies and youth organizations. His message was always the same: the importance of finding something larger than yourself to serve, and the satisfaction that comes from meeting high standards even when no one is watching. At one such event, a teenage cadet asked Michael how he had found the strength to stand still during the pepper spray attack. His answer revealed the maturity and wisdom he had gained from the experience. "I didn't find some superhuman strength," Michael explained. "I just remembered what I was there to represent." When you're part of something bigger than yourself, whether it's the military, your family, your community, or your beliefs, you discover that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. The strength wasn't really mine. It belonged to everyone who had stood in that position before me. The months following the documentary brought unexpected opportunities for Michael. He was invited to participate in military ceremonies around the Commonwealth, representing the Queen's Guard at international events. These assignments allowed him to travel and meet other military personnel while continuing to serve in the role he loved. During one such trip to Canada, Michael met with members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police who shared their own traditions of ceremonial duty. The conversations helped him understand that his experience was part of a broader tradition of public service that extended far beyond British borders. A year after the pepper spray incident, Michael was promoted to Lance Corporal, a recognition of both his exemplary service and his positive representation of the Queen's Guard. The promotion ceremony was small and private, reflecting Michael's preference for avoiding unnecessary attention. Commander Harrison spoke at the ceremony, addressing not just Michael's actions during the famous incident, but his consistent professionalism throughout his service. "Lance Corporal, Thompson has demonstrated that true military bearing isn't about one moment of exceptional performance, but about maintaining high standards every single day." Michael's family attended the promotion ceremony, with his mother beaming with pride as the new stripes were added to his uniform. His grandfather's military medals, which Margaret had brought to the ceremony, seemed to shine a little brighter in the ceremonial light. In his acceptance remarks, Michael thanked his fellow guards and his commanders for their support during an unusual period in his military career. But his final words reflected the humility that had characterized his response to fame from the beginning. "This promotion isn't really about what happened during that one ceremony," he said. "It's about the opportunity to continue serving alongside the finest soldiers I've ever known. The real honor isn't in being recognized for doing your duty. It's in being trusted to keep doing it, day after day, whether anyone is watching or not." As Michael resumed his regular duties with his new rank, tourists continued to visit Buckingham Palace, hoping to spot the famous Unfazed guard. Most of the time, they had no way of knowing whether the stone-faced soldier standing at attention was the same man who had become an international symbol of composure under pressure. And that was exactly how Michael preferred it. He had learned that true strength often goes unrecognized and that the most important acts of service happen when no cameras are rolling and no crowds are watching. The pepper spray incident had made him famous, but it had also taught him that fame was far less important than the quiet satisfaction of serving something greater than himself. Standing guard at one of the world's most famous palaces, Lance Corporal Michael Thompson continued to embody the values that had made his response to the pepper spray attack so remarkable. Unfazed by attention, unchanged by fame, and unwavering in his commitment to duty, he remained exactly what he had always been: a soldier in service of ideals larger than any individual recognition.